Hello, 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 and welcome back to That Quirky Bird Girl. I am your host, Steph, and I am here with Jamey Stegmaier, who is the co-founder of Stonemaier Games. Jamey, go ahead and kick us off with an introduction of yourself.
Well, hey, Steph, thank you so much for having me today. I am really excited to join this conversation with you. I am, as you said, the co-founder of a game company, a tabletop game company called Stonemaier Games. And we make a wide variety of games. But today I think we're largely going to talk about Wingspan and some of the games associated with Wingspan, like Wormspan and Finspan. I'm excited to talk to you about birds today and games and anything that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Jamey is also, he runs the community for Stonemaier Games or stonemaiers.com.
I do a lot of different things at Stonemaier Games, including the community management and marketing and things like that.
I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. I'd love to dive in and just talk about a little. Can you tell me a little bit about what the process looked like for getting the relationship started with Elizabeth Hargraves?
She's the designer of Wingspan. Yeah. I think it was back in 2016. I attended a convention called Gen Con, and we were having designers pitch games to us to potentially publish. And Elizabeth was one of those designers who shared this game about birds. And I loved her passion for birds. And one of the things that ended up in the final version of the game, as I think that you've noticed, is that many of the bird abilities in the game, in this card driven game, are tied to what's unique about those birds as well. And I was fascinated by how well Elizabeth had combined the mechanisms of the card with the themes of these different birds. And so we ended up working together on this game. She was the designer on it. I was the developer, trying to make the game as fun and balanced and as intuitive as possible. But she completely led the design process to make this game that we now know as Wingspan.
And what did that sort of start to finish? What did that process look like? And I know you mentioned it was a few years, so can you kind
Yeah.
of take us through what your journey looked like in that?
Yeah, for at least a year of that process, what it pretty much looked like is that Elizabeth would work on the game. She would work on some design aspect of the game, and she would send a prototype to me. I would print it out. I would cut it out. I would play it with local friends and my co-founder Alan. We would play it, and I would send feedback to Elizabeth to say, this is working really well. This isn't working as well. Let's try to improve this. We would talk about it, and Elizabeth would take that feedback and update the game and make a new version and test it locally and then send it back to me. And so for a long time, it was this back and forth of her working on the game, sending a version to me sending feedback back to her, until we got to the point where it was a game that we were both really, really happy with and that playtesters were really happy with. And that's when we started adding on the art and graphic design, like working with the artists Natalia and Anna. They did all of the 180 different bird illustrations in the game, a lot of different bird art in the game, and then finally going to the publishing and production process.
Gosh. And as the author of the Crowdfunder strategy guide, were there areas where you were leaning into some of the community aspect? It sounds like you were meeting with people and you also had game testers, but
Yeah.
how were you able to use your current network?
Well, during the design process, I think you're exactly right. The main way that other people knew about the game, that I was interacting with other people other than the designer and the artist about the game, were through playtesters and proofreaders. But it wasn't really until we announced the game to the world and made it public that that community side of things really started. And I have to say, looking back, this was in early 2019, around this time in 2019. Wingspan had a little bit of a rough start because I really underestimated the demand for it. I thought that I didn't know how people would receive the game. I loved the game, but I didn't know if people would love it as much as I did. And so we made 10,000 copies, which is a lot of copies of the game, but it turned out that was way fewer than we needed for the game. So there were definitely some frustrations early on about us not making enough. And we tried to quickly make more, but it takes months to produce another print run of a board game. So a lot of the community management early on was a little difficult, to be honest, in trying to manage that idea that we hadn't made enough copies and that we hadn't done this on purpose or out of any sort of malice. didn't make enough. I didn't know that we needed enough. And to
Yeah.
date now, we went from 10,000 to 2 million copies of Wingspan are now in print. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
That is so, so exciting. And yeah, the bird loving community is deep. I can imagine the kind of pressure that that felt like. So how long did it get or did it take to get more of those copies?
Well, so reviews for Wingspan came out a little bit before we started selling it. They came out in December. And so when the reviews started to come out and they were very, very positive, and we started to see how much excitement there was for it, we started one other print run then. And then we started another print run in January after we started to see how many people were buying the game. Even that wasn't nearly enough for what we needed. Because these print runs, they take around 3 months to make, and then we make them in China. And so it takes time to ship them from China to our different fulfillment centers worldwide. So it took some time. I would say we didn't really fully catch up with demand until maybe the 5th or 6th printing much later in the year. At that point, we probably had around 100,000 copies in print. And it was still growing because, as you said, I didn't even know that the birding community would want to play this somewhat complex strategy game, but they did, which was a wonderful surprise.
Yeah, it's actually so interesting the crossover between people who I've met in the bird space, and it's not to the same effect, but I find that the people who love chess love board games. That's just fun. I'm not sure if you've come across people that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I first saw it, I was living in Chicago and went to my local like board game store, and I got by that point the expansion pack was already out, the Oceania expansion pack.
Yeah.
My favorite bird is the laughing kookaburra. And I had a moment. So what did the time between the deciding to completing Wingspan into the expansion packs, what did that look like?
Yeah, that's been an interesting process that's changed a little bit over time. So, for example, Wingspan came out in early 2019, and Elizabeth, this was her first game design, and so she had a lot of time, well, more time then than she does now. And so she started working on the first expansion right away, which was the European expansion. And so we released that expansion within the same year, I think late 2019. And then after that, Elizabeth, I think her life changed a lot due to Wingspan. And so she discovered, I think, that she had a passion for designing games in general and not just designing Wingspan games, which I completely respect. I appreciate that. I love that about her. And so she has designed a couple of other games since then. But that also meant that she had a little bit less time to work on these expansions. So they were a little bit more spread out after that. You're right that Oceania came afterwards. I think that was about a year or two later. And then Wingspan Asia, which is also full of beautiful, colorful birds, that came out a little over 2 years ago. And now she is working on the next expansion. I can't tell you which continent is the next expansion, but it is it's another. She's working on the next expansion right now.
So exciting!
Yeah.
And what does your role look like in terms of building up that expansion? And are you still to what degree are you involved in that?
I would say it's actually pretty similar to my original involvement. I'm still the touch point, the project manager for the art, the graphic design, all these different elements that go into making the game, the oversight, the proofreading, and also I'm still the developer of it. So Elizabeth, whenever she's ready, she'll send me the current version of the game, and I'll test it and see how I feel about it. And at this point, I get really excited when she sends me a new prototype. Like I really want to see what she's done, and so I'm unfortunately. The really, really sad thing is that Elizabeth's father recently died, and her father had cancer, a long battle with cancer. And so she has been focused on that. Obviously, that has been her top priority, her family. And so there will come a day again where I will get another expansion version of the prototype from Elizabeth. But for months now, I just tried to respect her time and her space and for her to be there for her family. And so that's what she's working on right right now she's focusing on her family. And I think I know people are excited about the next expansion, but I also appreciate that people know that she is a person with her life to deal with as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important that she takes the time. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm glad that she is. And often, I've felt in the past like rushing back into work,
Yeah.
but that has done for me personally more harm than good. So I'm really glad that she's taking the time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to
I,
hear that.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. She's been, this isn't, I know it sounds odd for me to share this, but she's been very public about this process. And I think it's been, as someone, I lost my dad a few years ago. So it's been really helpful for me to see her talk about it publicly. And so I think it's one of those tough subjects, but it's also important to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And can I ask a question about your
Yeah, of course.
so when you did lose your family member, your father, was community, how did your relationship change around community, if at all?
Yeah. It was, um, it was amazing. Yeah, it was really, really special because I do these like live casts every Wednesday on the Stonemaier Games Facebook page and YouTube channel, and I see the same names every week, and I see some new names pop up. Essentially, these are strangers, but they're people that I see and that I feel like I know through these conversations that I have. And it was, you can tell I'm getting a little emotional now because it was really incredible to see how these strangers were supporting me in a time that was really difficult and still is difficult. So yeah, it these are good tears because I felt really, really, really comforted as a result. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and take a tissue if you need to,
Yeah,
but
thanks.
I
Yeah.
appreciate your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Of course. And it sounds like you have such an amazing community of people who really rally and have been there for you.
Yeah, and I try to be there for them too. I think it goes both ways. I'm very grateful for them, and hopefully, I've been able to bring some joy to them through games or whatever our conversations are over the last few years. Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
think that that's part of what drives some of your passion as well in games? Because maybe there's some like, I've been given so much. Do you relate to that at all?
I very, very much do. And it's really grown. Games are still the foundation of it, but it's grown beyond that in some unexpected ways. Like you have your podcast. I have a YouTube channel now where I talk about game design, and I have some of the most wonderful conversations have come from those conversations about game design. And I also blog a couple times every week about entrepreneurship and marketing and crowdfunding, and the conversations that have come from that are really amazing too. And I think they're mutually beneficial. I'm sharing things that I've done, that I've tried, that mistakes that I've made, and people are also relating to that, and I'm learning from them as part of those conversations. So, uh, yeah, the community that has happened around our games and around the YouTube channel, the our Facebook groups, it's incredible. Yeah,
I'm so glad that you have really leaned into to the community and allowed them to support you. I think there have been times where, as a creator, I myself, specifically throughout 2024, found myself like a push pull of like, ah, I love community building, love my community, but
yeah.
sometimes love, it can be a little overwhelming in the most beautiful of ways. Did you find yourself with any of those feelings?
I uh yes, you're right. There are some unexpected things that can emerge from that community. I think there is a sometimes a fine line between a really healthy community and healthy relationships with the people in the community and vice versa. And that line can sometimes be crossed in ways that aren't, I mean, sometimes it can it can get dark. But sometimes even just crossing the line is sometimes uh people will, and this is a very minor thing, but people will email me rules questions about our games, and which is fine for them to do. But I'd much rather them ask those because they feel like they know me. They can email me, which is fine. But I'd much rather they ask those rules questions in a public Facebook group or something like that, because that way other people can learn the answers too. I'm not sure if that's exactly the type of thing that you were talking about, but it's just one of those things that can happen when you have a mutually supporting community. Sometimes people forget, oh, okay, the whole point of the community is that we're doing this together, not privately one-on-one. Have you experienced anything like that?
I definitely have. I have an email where often people will send me they'll send me photos and videos. I do a bird
Uh,
trivia night every Sunday night,
okay. Uh,
and they'll send me photos and videos of birds that they see, or sometimes they'll send me directly like videos instead of tagging me.
uh,
And I think I do have a preference for the tagging,
yeah.
but I think there have definitely been points, especially lately, where I've needed the community to sort of be as, I mean, in, involved, I suppose I could
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also been sort of, uh, community is very new to me. And I think that growing up in the United States, you might relate to this particularly. Did you grow up in the Midwest?
I grew up in Virginia.
Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay. I definitely feel, and not sure if you relate to this, but I'm born and raised in Michigan, lived in Chicago for about 10 years, and I always felt like there was this push to be independent.
Mm.
And I think that can pull us away from the community. I think that's more what I'm speaking to. And
Yeah.
has that been something you've noticed within yourself, or have you just dove straight in with the community?
Oh no, and I have felt that a lot. And sometimes I think I put that on myself, maybe because of my upbringing. But for a long time, like at Stonemaier Games, it was just me doing everything, just running everything in the company. I did have a co-founder, but Alan has a family. He has another full-time job, so it was really just me running everything. And so it wasn't until 2020 that it really hit me that I needed some help to do the best things that I could for our community. And so that's when I brought on my coworker Joe, and then I added my coworker Alex, and now at this point I have 7 coworkers. So I wasn't expecting that, but for a long time I really did feel like, oh, this is just all on me. This is what my life is, and I'm really grateful now that I have these other people here to support me and for me to support them.
Yeah, yeah. And what was the adjustment from like, of going from it being sort of you driving forward a lot of this work to then having to um, really delegate some of it
Yeah.
and evolve in your role too?
You know, it was definitely a shift to try to learn to adapt to that. But I think I often, or it appears that I try to hire people who are fairly autonomous. Um, and so often I think maybe the flaw in this is that oftentimes when I bring someone on, like when I brought in Joe or Alex, I kind of brought them on to say, okay, this is what your job's going to be, and you go do your job, and I'll do my job, and we'll talk about it every now and then. But for the most part, it's just go do it. I trust you to do it, and I know you can do it, and you can probably do it better than I can. So go do it. And I think for the most part that has worked out. But I think I have also learned that um, there's a maybe a good transition process for someone, especially when they're starting out fresh, uh, to not just go free immediately and just do those types of things. They need a little bit more support from me at the beginning. So that's been something that I've tried to learn along the way.
And that's been, so you said in 2020, that's been
Yeah,
about almost 5 years now
that's
then.
right. Yeah, yeah, just over 5 years. And Erica was our most recent hire around this time last year. She started working on. We previously had sold games to a distributor who sold to Amazon. And rather than having those two middlemen in between, we just decided we're going to sell our games on Amazon. and we hired someone to take care of that because Amazon is a lot to work with, and so Erica handles all those Amazon sales.
That's so amazing. And
Yeah.
I was taking a look at your website and I love your approach to hiring too, because you can fill out a form directly on your website. For those of you that are looking for, I'm not sure if you're hiring, but I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah, it's good. We often I found that I often don't realize that we need to hire someone until the day that I realize that, and at that point I need to hire someone right away. Often I want to jump into it, and so we have basically a rolling job application on our website where it isn't for any specific job. It's just if someone really likes Stonemaier Games and they think that they might be able to use their skill set to benefit Stonemaier Games, they can fill out that application. Yeah, I don't have any plans to hire anyone in the future, but it is certainly possible it can happen. And that's the first place I'll go to when that day comes.
That's so amazing. I want to talk a little bit about Finspan
Yes. Yeah, I have it
too.
next to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Have you gotten to play it yet?
No, I
No.
haven't. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. The very short story is after Wingspan really took off around 3 years ago, we as a company, my coworkers and we have some shareholders too who are involved in the company. We sat down and we were like, okay, what should we continue to expand Wingspan beyond birds? Because at that point, the community, as we talked about a lot today, a lot of people in the community had said, can you do Wingspan with fish? Can you do Wingspan with dinosaurs or dragons or insects? Everyone had their own animal species. In fact, I'll ask you after this which animal species you would have chosen if you were us. But the two that came to mind were the idea that came to mind really was let's make one game that is a little bit more complex than Wingspan. And for that one, we chose between dinosaurs and dragons. We ended up going with dragons. And then we said, okay, let's make one game that's a little bit less complex than Wingspan. And we chose fish for that. And that's where Finspan came from. So what would you, if you were in that conversation, what animal would you have advocated for?
I would have leaped off of my desk to advocate for dragons.
Oh, you would? Oh, awesome. Okay.
Which I'm so glad that, well, it sounds like there was a little bit of a toss up, but I
Yeah.
love. I mean, like the concept of mythical, someone was talking to me earlier this week about using birds as sort of like a jumping off point
Yeah.
and giving them qualities as another type of animal. So, like, for example, a blue jay, they can mimic other calls. Maybe there's like some sort of dragon that can mimic a human's voice. I don't know, just
Yeah.
that thinking in that way, I get so excited. There's so much creativity. Is that kind of what your process looks like?
That is exactly how that process looked like. And that's what made it fun. I think there was maybe some disappointment for people who love the realism of birds that we went with something fantastical. But I like that I really like that we did it. I think there's a lot of freedom when you look into the fantastical. And like you said, we can still tie these types of things. We try to make the dragons feel real. And so we tied them back to real world animals in the Dragon Facts. And I know you play Wingspan Digital a lot. There is a Wormspan Digital that I'm hoping will release next year. The same company that made Wingspan Digital is working on it. And so they're aiming for, I think, early to mid 2026 for that.
That is so exciting. And
Yeah.
can you tell me a little bit more about Wormspan as well?
Yeah, Wormspan. So it's very similar to Wingspan in that you're creating these rows of cards. There are a couple differences, pretty big differences. One is that the theme of Wormspan is that you have this, I guess, a property, a yard, a place where you live, and there are caves on this property. And for you to take care of dragons, you need to kind of dig out the caves to make more room for the dragons. And so instead of just putting dragons directly onto your mat, you have to excavate a cave and put a little cave card on there as you dig deeper into this tavern or a cavern, and then you put a dragon on top of it. So there are two types of cards that interact a little bit in Wormspan. And then I would say my favorite part about Wormspan are the hatchlings. The hatchlings are little baby dragons, and they're dragon cards like any other dragon card, but they every time you walk over them, that you pass over them, kind of like in Wingspan when you move a cube over a bird, they want something. They want some food, or they want some milk. They want something. And so if you give them that something, they give you a little reward. And eventually, if they have enough of that thing, if you fed them enough, then they grow up and they give you a big reward for growing up into a full dragon. So that's one of the things that isn't in Wingspan at all, that's unique to Wormspan, that I really love.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. It's like you're evolving a
Yeah,
dragon.
yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Wait, that sounds so much fun. To be a fly on the wall in your like creativity department, or like those conversations, that must have been so like I can't even imagine. Can you tell me a little bit about what the energy felt like in those rooms when you were building?
Yeah, well, for Wormspan, I was working with a designer named Connie Vogelman, and it was a. I'm lucky to work with all of our designers. Connie is a lot of fun to work with. A lot of this was over email, where she would email an idea to me, and I would say, "Okay, I think I love that idea. Um, let's try it. Let's try it." And I would throw an idea at her, and we would try it. A lot of it is throwing out these ideas and then trying them to see what actually works and makes sense in the game. It's a really fun process. Um, and then it really does eventually start to feel like work, because you finally figure out, okay, we love this hatchling idea. Now we have to design 50 cards that all feel different, that all use this mechanism. And that's fun too, in a different way. But it is, I appreciate Connie for coming up with so many different hatchling cards.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. Well, it was so great to have you on. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah,
If
my
you
pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I loved talking about these topics with you. And if you ever, maybe when the next Wingspan expansion comes out, we could talk about it if you'd like on your live cast. Or even Wingspan Asia is coming out on Wingspan Digital this summer, I believe. And so we could talk about Wingspan Asia then, if you want, when that's released.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'd love to. I'd
yeah,
love to. Could you share with the community a little bit on how they can find you and stay in touch?
yeah. The hub for everything is at stonemeiergames.com, stonemeiergames.com. And if you have problem spelling that, you could look up, just search for Wingspan Publisher online on Google, and you can find us. And it's there that you can choose any way that you want to follow us. Like if you want to follow my game design stuff, you can follow the YouTube. If you want to follow the entrepreneurial stuff, you can follow that on the website. Or like my Instagram at Jamey Stegmaier is where I talk about games and cats and food and all sorts of things there. So lots of different ways to follow us depending on what works for you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much again for joining.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.